So hopefully you've read this handout by now. It's chapter 15 is from a different textbook. That's why this is a supplement. So the idea of this is to go over some of the techniques associated with resistance training and to look at some of the variations in some of these techniques within resistance training. It's not that important that you necessarily know how to do every single one of these, but to basically just have an understanding. So when you see certain variations of exercises, you can critically evaluate and decide whether or not it's something that's going to be useful to you. So whenever we're grabbing a bar, and a lot of in strength conditioning, we tend to use free weights, resistance exercises that use a bar that you add weight to that is movable throughout space, unlike a machine where it's fixed and the weight stacks run along these columns or runners, and there's a set of pulleys and levers that you use. So a lot of what we do is going to be with some of these free weights. So the hand grip variations, that's just important to have an understanding of first off that there are differences, and the reason for these differences have to do with possibly the execution of the exercise, whether or not you're in a position that's going to be more beneficial to use an overhand grip, which is going to be this pronated grip here, A, or the supinated grip in B. And then in C, you can see that there's this alternated or combination grip, so one is over the other. So for example, in the A, if you were doing a tricep push down or tricep extension exercise, this is the grip that you would use. If you were doing a bicep curl or maybe a row or something like that you wanted to influence specific muscle groups, or just because of the way that the bar is going to be oriented, then you're going to want to use this supinated grip. This alternated grip is something that's going to be commonly used in things like deadlift, to where the exercise in general has to do with an overall total body or lower extremity, so the grip isn't going to be that important, and really it's just about keeping that bar within your hands. And then this is what's referred to as a hook grip. If you look here, you can see the thumb is actually wrapped under that forefinger, and what that does is it helps to lock it in, and this is a common technique used in certain types of Olympic weightlifting. Where you're going to grip the bar is also going to be dependent on what it is that you would like to accomplish. As far as body position goes, what I'd really like to emphasize is posture. So really using good posture. So that's maintaining your head in a good position, your torso in a good position, protecting that spine. So maintaining what's referred to as normal upright or military posture, essentially. The other one that I like to use as a visual is the sport readiness, where you're kind of in that standing position. You've got some flex in your hips, you've got some flex in your knees, and you're a little bit more forward onto your toes. The only difference may be is you're probably anything that you're going to be driving through the floor, normally that movement is going to be assisted and performed from the heel back position. Breathing considerations, first and foremost, do it. So we usually don't teach people specific forms of breathing until they've actually been able to execute the exercise appropriately. And then we can actually use breathing as a technique. So breathing can become important, but mostly we're really concerned to make sure that people breathe. Typically you're going to breathe out on the exertion component, and you're going to breathe in or inhale when the exercise is on the down phase or the eccentric. There's also something called the Valsalva maneuver, which is a technique of holding your breath. That goes a little bit beyond what we're going to discuss here. Weight belts and other types of implements, most of the time they're actually going to be used for maximal exercises and things that may require a little bit more support. So there's some advantage to them, but in general, even in strength and conditioning, we typically don't use a lot of it, just simply because the focus of the athlete's preparation is not as a weightlifter per se. It's another sport. So in other words, the weightlifting technique is secondary to what they actually do for sport. We're not going to get into a lot of spotting technique, but to know that it's very important, especially when utilizing free weights, that we do have a form of spotting. Okay, So if you look here at these pictures A and B, you can see that there are certain ways to spot, and that's a protection for both you, the spotter, as well as the person exercising, because if you get hurt and you fall on top of that person, well, then there's a double whammy effect. So there are specific techniques to make sure that, you know, really everyone is going to be safe. So I encourage you to, you know, review these spotting techniques or guidelines for spotting, so you have some sense or some ideas. And there's just, I like to say it's a lot of common sense, but there's some basic things, you know, to take into consideration, such as whether or not you can lift that weight, you know, the experience of the spotter, the experience of the lifter, and those things to take into consideration, you know, when you're really trying to go for those heavy lifts. And that really comes down to, do you really need to be, you know, trained